Ganyu, originally released a year ago, is getting her first ever rerun after a year in Genshin Impact. Is the almighty cocogoat still really good after a year, or has she been power crap and been abandoned already? Let's talk about Ganyu. But before we start, as always, this video focuses on meta reason and we'll be talking about Ganyu as a meta role. And as always, if you're not subscribed already, don't forget to subscribe and follow me on other social media platforms such as Twitch or Twitter. To begin, Ganyu is currently one of the only characters that is rated relatively high at a whopping 4 out of 5 rating. Keep in mind that a 3 out of 5 rating indicates that a character is balanced, which is where most characters fall into, which means a 4 out of 5 rating is above that. She is very valuable for almost any account, and the only character that can really compete with Ganyu at the current moment is Ayaka, which we will dive deeper into the Ayaka comparison into the later part of the video. Now, a lot of people commonly assume that, oh, Ganyu is really powerful because her charge attack does a lot of damage, but this is not really the reason. In fact, in terms of damage output, Ganyu's damage output is relatively speaking in line with most other meta character, whether that be Ayaka or Huta or something like that, but it is really her versatility that make her outshine other characters. To begin, Ganyu have both very strong AoE and single target damage, which make her very suitable for almost any encounter. One of the reasons is because Ganyu have 2 major playstyles and is one of the only character who can play in 2 different playstyles, which is Freeze and Melt. Both Freeze Ganyu and Melt Ganyu are very meta and are very strong in different category respectively, with Ganyu Freeze team having very strong CC and AoE capability, and especially if the enemy can be gripped up by Venti, in which case the Ganyu Venti combo currently have the highest AoE potential in the game. On the other hand, however, Melt Ganyu composition is able to dish out very good burst and single target damage, making it very strong against boss type enemy. Whether it is AoE or single target, Ganyu can deal with them in a reasonable amount of way. Of course, Ganyu might not always be the best character at dealing against every single enemy. For example, Huta would be better than Ganyu as single target damage, but even though Ganyu might not be the best, she would be at least very good at pretty much doing anything. Even more importantly is that Ganyu does not really have any soft counter. A soft counter means that enemy is not very favorable for the current character to fight against. For example, the PMA for Xiao or the Wolfhound for Yulia. There are reasons why these characters doesn't do so well against the enemy, mostly because there are some mechanics in the enemy that just counter the current characters. Or maybe there are some kind of abyss debuff that pretty much just prevent you from playing that character ideally, such as like Soaring Water or Energy Drain debuff, which hurt some characters dramatically more than other. It doesn't mean that you cannot use the characters against a soft counter, but it's just significantly harder and might give you a lot of trouble at doing so. But Ganyu not having any soft counter just means that Ganyu is good in pretty much every single scenario, whether or not there is an abyss debuff, whether or not the enemy is really annoying. Ganyu has always remained to be very good against pretty much every enemy. The reason of this is because Ganyu's charge attack is one of the only unconditional on-demand attack in the game, which means that if you want to cast Ganyu attack, you will be able to do so. If you want to do a charge attack, you can do it. It's just have to aim and charge it up and do it. And it will also still do a very good amount of damage and also apply a very good amount of cryo, which matter against enemies such as the Abyss Lectures or Hero. On the other hand, like debuffs such as Flowing Water and Energy Drain will affect pretty much most of the other characters in a really negative, harmful way. For example, Ayaka might have some issue casting her elemental burst under certain debuff that was just mentioned because she might not be able to get energy or her cooldown might be significantly increased. And of course, as Ayaka elemental burst contribute to a lot of her damage, missing out on her elemental burst is really detrimental for Ayaka. This is not really the case for Ganyu. Furthermore, Ganyu charge attack is one of the only attack in the game that have infinite range, meaning that she can have true range advantage. While enemy like the Wolfhound might dash very far away from you and block you off with their weird collision hitboxes, as Ganyu have true range advantage, she's not limited by these factors at all and is able to upkeep DPS much better than other characters. Maybe the enemy dash very far away from you and therefore you have to chase after them and therefore you lose very valuable DPS uptime. Ganyu doesn't really have this problem because you can just keep shooting at them. The only thing that prevents you from upkeeping DPS on Ganyu is not being able to aim and not being able to hit your attack, which is commonly known as has skill issues. Anyway, with that being said, overall, there are many soft counter for other characters, but Ganyu's ability to perform well in pretty much any scenario just make her more valuable than many other characters. Keep in mind, this does not prevent Ganyu from being hard countered by certain enemy. A hard counter means that your character just straight up does not work, and this happens with pretty much every single characters. For example, if a character is straight up immune to cryo, or the chamber just does not allow you to use charge attack or something like that, then well, Ganyu will suffer the same fate as other characters. Do know that Maku Genki does not fall into the hard counter category, commonly misconception, because Maku Genki only block attack from range, but you can still attack the Maku Genki using a charge attack by standing in melee range. In fact, Melt Ganyu work really well against the Maku Genki. So with that being said, what are some reasons that one might not roll Ganyu? Well, if you already own Ayaka and is not really looking for another crowd DPS, then you do have to roll Ganyu. This is probably one of the only reasons why one does not roll Ganyu. The other reasons being like you just don't like playing Ganyu, you can't play Ganyu because she's required you to aim, and you just can't aim because you're playing on mobile. Do know that when you are playing Ganyu in Morgana Freeze team, Morgana Freeze team doesn't really require Ganyu to do any charge attack at all, but it's still a contributing factor to why you might not play Ganyu. But other than these reasons, I would strongly suggest that you pick Ganyu up. In fact, even if you already own Ayaka, you can still find value in picking Ganyu up because you can pair Ayaka and Ganyu together to draft a very powerful team. Aside from being able to play Ganyu as a main DPS, Ganyu can also be a very strong crowd sub DPS. You heard that right. Ganyu, aside from being a strong main DPS that can be played in any scenario, you can actually play Ganyu as a strong crowd sub DPS as well. You can pair Ayaka and Ganyu together and you'll be able to draft a super good freeze team that can pretty much destroy almost anything as long as they can be frozen. You can pair Chao and Ganyu together to do a Chao freeze team, which is a very meta team. It's just a lot less known. You can even do something like Hu Tao, Xingqiu's, and then on top of that a Ganyu, which lets you get melt off on Hu Tao. And even maybe with a elegy on the Ganyu to further boost your team damage like with your Hu Tao team. These are all very viable use cases for Ganyu, and sub DPS crowd Ganyu is actually really good in these cases. That is because Ganyu Elemental Burst provide a 20% crowd damage bonus to your entire party, and on top of that, it has very large range coverages, very good crowd application, and most importantly, it has 100% uptime, which means that yes, Ganyu does act as a very good crowd sub DPS, which just further increase her value in your account. To be honest, pretty much every meta player should look for either one of Ayaka or Ganyu, and they should try to draft a freeze team with one of them. While Ayaka is stronger than Ganyu in her own way, for example like having much higher front-loaded burst damage, or just having a easier time of drafting a team because you can play with like Xingqiu's. In fact, to be honest, you can argue that like Ayaka freeze team is stronger than Ganyu freeze team in terms of at least raw power damage, but Ganyu being more versatile than Ayaka just make her a much more worthy pickup than Ayaka. Again, does not mean Ayaka is weak, but Ganyu simply is just more valuable as she is able to perform in a lot of scenarios. Nevertheless, both Ayaka and Ganyu are very strong and are at the top of the meta, so simply pick between your favorite out of one of the two. So if you like Ganyu better, just pick Ganyu up. If you like Ayaka better, then just pick Ayaka up, or maybe you can get a Ganyu on top of that as well. If you decided that you'd rather have Ayaka as your main crowd carry and you only want one of Ayaka or Ganyu, and you're willing to wait for Ayaka in the future rerun, then you don't have to roll for Ganyu here. It is okay, just simply pick one of the two. Both are very strong and can carry you all the way. However, Ayaka does one thing that is dramatically better than Ganyu, and that is pay to win factor. As always, this probably does not apply to that many people, but it's worth mentioning here anyway. Ayaka's signature 5-star weapon, the Mist Splitter, is currently one of the best 5-star weapon in Genshin Impact. In fact, it is considered to be the best 5-star weapon in Genshin Impact. And on top of that, Ayaka have much better constellation than Ganyu, especially Constellation 4, which reduce the enemy defense. That means that if you are willing to invest more into your Ayaka, money-wise, like for example picking up her signature weapon alongside her, she could outperform Ganyu in a very meaningful and dramatic way. And this gap grows bigger as you approach C6R5 between the two characters. A C6R5 Ayaka will outperform a C6R5 Ganyu in a very significant way. So that's definitely something to keep in mind if you're not a free-to-play or a cheap-to-play player. Speaking of free-to-play, Ganyu is one of the easiest characters to get started, but she does have minor trouble drafting a team in the mid-game. When you don't have many supporting characters available, Ganyu is one of the best performing characters because her charge attack is so independent that you don't really need any support at all. All you need to do is pair her with some very basic teammate like any Anemo character for VV Shred or any Carlos user for TTDS, and you can get very good performance with just using Ganyu charge attack. Where, you know, other characters require some kind of specific support, for example, like applying element to do a reaction. This is the case for Huta with Xingqiu's, or just for providing energy. Like, you know, you need a cryo character to pair with Ayaka because you need cryo energy. But once you're able to start drafting those proper team in Genshin, you might actually realize that it's slightly more difficult to draft a Ganyu team using only 4-star characters, and especially compared to Ayaka who can use Xingqiu's as well. This is because Ganyu meta team pretty much demand at least one other 5-star character, sometimes even more. For example, in Mel Ganyu, Bennett and even Zhongli is pretty much required, and then you want either a Xiangling or a Kazuya, which are all really meta characters and there are no possible other replacement. On the other hand, a Freeze Ganyu Morgana team will require you to have two 5-star characters, with one being the Anemo slot. You need either Kazuya or Venti, which are both 5-star characters, and then you need another Hydro 5-star character, which is either Mona or Kokomi. This means that drafting a high-end Ganyu team will be relatively speaking more expensive than drafting other characters team. This means that it might be harder to draft a high-end Ganyu team when you first get started, but nevertheless, these teams should be the end game goal of any player because most of these are universal characters like Kazuya, and they should be picked up regardless or not whether you own Ganyu. Overall, Ganyu definitely held her reputation as the cocogoat over an entire year. In fact, it probably went up as well, because when Ganyu first came out, she was the first out of many quote-unquote meta character that we know today. Back at the time, the community was still playing around with Diluc being called the quote-unquote best DPS character at the time, and with Diluc being our only other comparison point, it was not immediately obvious why Ganyu is so much more powerful than many other units. However, as time go on, with us getting more and more character for comparison purposes and benchmarking, and with us having more enemy to face against some of these soft countering a lot of the other characters, then of course most importantly with Xiangling power creeping Diluc, meaning that Diluc wasn't actually the best character at the time, it become more and more obvious of why Ganyu is actually so strong. And today, the only real competition that can face off against Ganyu on equal ground is, to be honest, Ayaka. And that's pretty much it for Ganyu. Good luck on your Ganyu roll if you do decide to roll Ganyu. And as always, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. And I'll see you all next time.